Hey friends, welcome to SimplyWell. This is Maria, and today I'm going to be doing some video blogging for my blog post. This is a much more personable format. I want to say hello to all of the new subscribers. As you may have noticed, I took a month-and-a-half long break from any blogging whatsoever because I realized in 5 years I had probably not even gone a single day without thinking about migraine. And so there's a little bit of irony there for me, because I worked so hard for so many years to find folk medicine, natural, nutritional-based solutions to migraine to heal myself, and then now I think about everyone else's migraines as a migraine coach. So I realized and recognized that there was a real need in my life to take a break from all migraine research and see kind of what arises in that space. And since my son has been out of school, what has arisen out of that space is just a lot of time with my kids, which has been great. A lot less research, and I've worked on some creative projects that had kind of gone by the wayside. But I absolutely love what I do. I am very excited to be getting back into the rhythm with my work with SimplyWell. And today I want to talk about leverage points beyond nutrition for healing migraine and the ways that I've been implementing some of these leverage points in my own life. Of course, this is just my life. I don't mean to imply that, what is the solution for me is necessarily what's right for you, but hopefully this will seem relevant to you. So we all know that stress plays a huge role in migraine. And we know that stressful conditions activate the herpes virus. If you're not familiar with my blog post on the role of herpes and the herpes virus that lives in the brain and latently in the cranial nerves, please check that out in my blog. But stress, activates herpes virus. Stress depletes our magnesium, which in turn affects all of our enzymatic processes, since magnesium is so crucially needed for all of our enzymes so that we can properly break food down. So stress, also one other thing it does is it increases cortisol. And what do we need to make cortisol? We need progesterone. So by being stressed out a lot, we're reducing our progesterone. We need progesterone because progesterone is a glutamate transporter, and it helps glutamate get into the right places. And without sufficient progesterone, there will be an excess buildup of glutamate. So there are very tangible reasons that we want to reduce stress that we can recognize and look at from a nutritional standpoint in the way that stress depletes us nutritionally. But it's just a no-brainer that we need to be able to self-regulate in our lives. And I think a lot of people know this, and they know they need to be less stressed, but they don't really know how to do it because it's each person's stress is so particular to them. So what I want to focus on today, not knowing you, is just from the standpoint of craniosacral therapy, which is what I studied prior to doing the migraine research. Basically, an organism or a person or a nervous system regulates better at a slower tempo. So I like to look at stress management and stress in terms of tempo. So essentially, when our lives get very speedy and overly packed with things to do, which most moderns suffer from this, the tempo of life is so quick that it is disorienting. So part of the ability to self-regulate comes from orientation, being able to orient to your source of nourishment and to be able to have things happening at a pace that you can process, that you can digest, and that you can metabolize properly. And when things happen really, really fast, it's disorienting, it's dysregulating because we lose touch with our own inner voice, our body wisdom, the wiser part of ourself that says, maybe you shouldn't eat that bar of chocolate, because everything becomes kind of more in emergency survival mode. And in this alarm state, this highly activated alarm state where nothing is really done for nourishment, it's just really surviving. So we need to get out of this state, and yet modern life is extraordinarily fast-paced. How do we do that? Well, for me, what I did is I moved out to the country, and I grew up in the country, so for me that is the most self-regulating environment, is one in which I'm surrounded by nature, and the nature is constantly showing me how to slow down. And the wisdom of nature, I'm looking at the trees right now, the wisdom of nature is reminding me of really the big picture. And I think that's one of the biggest losses in living in a city, at least for me as a country girl, is that life just seems all about human activity, and so it can be difficult to find these refreshing spaces and places that show us the bigger picture. And there are big, huge, enormous parks in some big cities, and for some people that's their habitat. And I don't mean to imply that there's no way to self-regulate in a city. And for those of you that have found a way to find stillness and to resource yourself and slow down in a city, please lend your comments down below and share with others. But I think the point is just that when we're trying to change certain lifestyle habits or patterns, such as poor eating choices, that are triggering and exacerbating our migraines, that can be harder to get into a rhythm with new habits when we're so overextended that we're barely even maintaining on the most basic level. And so it's about resiliency, it's about resourcing. When we're overextended and there's no breathing room or extra spaciousness, or no buffer zone, no freedom when something happens, like for example, if you get a migraine, what is the resiliency in a system that's already overextended when something unexpected like that happens? Well, a lot of people are just continuing to try to function with their migraines as though everything were normal. Like when I got migraines, of course, as a stay-at-home mom, I didn't have any sick leave. I didn't have any break from my kids just because I got a migraine, so my husband would have to take a day off work. So how much, without grandparents, without aunties and uncles around, if you, like most people, don't live where you grew up, in other words, you're not connected to your root, where's the resiliency in that system? So I think it doesn't make sense for anyone with a chronic illness to try to act, live as though they don't have one and that they don't need resiliency, because we all need it. So a resilient system would be one in which we're optimally resourced. We're living at a slow tempo so we can get our body's messages when we need them. We can actually listen to our inner voice. We have family and friends and community resources nearby so that when something like that happens, like say we get a migraine, we have support beyond just one person, like our partner. Because there were times when my husband simply couldn't not work that day. He can't just drop everything. And so as a mother, you're breastfeeding with a migraine. This is why pharmaceuticals are so appealing to people, because we don't have the community resiliency that we need to be able to take the message that our body is saying, you need to slow down. On the most fundamental level, I think that migraines are a message that the body is saying, I'm going to give you something so incapacitating because you are not learning to slow yourself down. And so now you have to. But of course, if you have a pharmaceutical that can just wipe that out, you don't have to. You can continue to be sick and be living a life in which you're acting like you're not. And so this is really what's so bad about pharmaceuticals. I speak out against pharmaceuticals a lot just because, for a number of reasons. I think it's my role to do that. It's neither here nor there. If you're using pharmaceuticals and they're helping you to function, it's not my place to judge that. But what I will say is that we know that pharmaceuticals have side effects. We know that pharmaceuticals are very hard on the liver and kidneys to process, and that migraine comes largely about from liver and kidney dysfunction. And so it's not supportive of the health of those two organs. We also know that anything that you take daily or frequently is going to be affecting your microbiome, and a disrupted microbiome also leads to migraines. And we also know that, pharmaceuticals are just suppressive and they don't really address the root cause of the problem. This is not a new insight. We're all aware of this. But so what are the implications of that, I think is the bigger question for me. It's not just that pharmaceuticals have side effects and they don't address the root of the problem. The real problem with pharmaceuticals is that if you are relying on something that doesn't address the root of the problem for long enough, essentially what you're doing is you're allowing that condition to get worse. Yeah, so we need to find the biggest leverage points we can so that we're not so reliant on pharmaceuticals in order to just function. So besides community, which I already mentioned, sleep and exercise, I think I've identified as being the biggest leverage points besides nutrition. And I've known for a long time that I need to exercise more, and as a mother that there's basically 2 windows of time to do that. It's early in the morning prior to cooking breakfast, which is not doable if you don't get a good night's sleep. It's not realistic for me to wake up early if I have not gotten any sleep at night because of breastfeeding the baby or whatever. That's why sleep is the #1 priority. So the other time to exercise would be right when my husband gets home and he can take the kids prior to dinner, because you don't want to be exercising after eating. So there's really those 2 little windows, which is really 1 window if you're not getting good sleep. So I have been doing that. I've been exercising half an hour every other day, right when my husband gets home prior to us eating dinner. But really my top priority now, and really a priority means one important choice. In this book, Essentialism, he points out that we tend to think of priorities, which is just a sort of non-essentialist way of trying to get everything done, which is not the same thing as having a priority. So right now, my priority is sleep. That's my only priority. I'm not letting anything compete with that, not even my desire to hang out with my husband after the kids have gone to sleep. Basically, after the kids have gone to sleep, even if there's, the tons of dishes in the sink, even if I haven't seen my husband in a few days, I just go to bed. And, it would seemingly be simple. You just make the choice to do that. You lay down in bed and fall asleep. Well, we know it's not that simple for people with migraine because of the high cortisol levels that we have. So we don't fall asleep just because we lay down. So I want to share with you a few of my favorite sleep aids. And again, that's a pill-based approach. So I just want to say that even though some of these sleep aids like glycine, magnesium, and niacin, all of which reduce cortisol levels, can help nudge you in the right direction. And in some cases, if you're really exhausted, you'll just fall asleep when you take them. But it's like any pill-based approach. It's a lot to expect one single pill to do all of that. So ultimately, I think that the key I've noticed is just go to bed consistently at the same time every night, even if you're not able to fall asleep for the first 3 or 4 nights. And eventually, for me, at least after 5 or 6 nights, my body started to get the message that, yes, this can actually happen. You can actually go to sleep. So the glycine will make you kind of groggier. It won't knock you out, but it does increase the GABA and reduce the glutamate. The niacin flush I personally like, and some people don't mind, but it can be very intense for some people, so please be cautious with niacin. 250 milligrams is what I usually use. It also increases serotonin, and it clears out high cholesterol. It's interesting that when people get migraines, they have higher cholesterol during an episode of migraine than not. And so I'm going to be going in great detail on this in my upcoming blog post on good and bad fats. I've recently come across some really interesting information that my parents passed on to me about oxidized cholesterol that's really important. And I think the key point that I've learned from that is that this may be one reason why niacin helps to abort a migraine, is because there's a lot of sticky blood and oxidized cholesterol and oxidized fats, basically PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids that have been oxidized through heat or cooking, which clog the arteries and compromise blood flow, and the niacin works to flush that out. It works on a lipid level, on a fat-based level. And then magnesium also works to lower cortisol. So it's best to take these like about half an hour before you're wanting to go to bed. So I just made that my priority. I have weaned my son at night. So, I mean, breastfeeding and motherhood and migraine just do not go together. But of course, as mothers, we're self-sacrificing. We want what's best for our kids. And I felt it was too early to wean my son prior to this. So it takes a while for the nervous system to start new habits and to get the message that you're not going to be on demand all the time. And for me, a lot of my insomnia had to do with that, which was like my system was just waiting for my son to wake up. It was like I wasn't even thinking a lot at night. It's not like I had an active mind. I was just lying there, and my nervous system knew that at any moment I could be woken up to be nursed, and so it just didn't see the point in sleeping at all. So sleep is the #1 leverage point. Slow down, sleep, rest, let your body rejuvenate. And in the hours prior to 12 o'clock, your body does a lot more repair. So it's not okay to just stay up till 12 and then sleep in really late and think that just because you got 8 hours of sleep that your body has had the same chance to rejuvenate, because it hasn't. And for me, 10 o'clock is the absolute latest. And it'd be cool if I could go to bed even earlier than that. Just go straight to bed with the kids. But there's something psychological about this that's like hard to do because you don't want to miss out on anything. There's something about it, for me, where like solitude and having a little free space to work on a creative project or even just read, for me that's like, it's such a nice part of the day, and like I feel like I'm missing out on that part of my life when I just go to sleep early. But I'm telling you, it's worth it, and it's something that it's just hard to get leverage anywhere else without having leverage on sleep. Yeah, that in that book, The Deepest Well by Nadine Harris, she mentions sleep is the first, exercise the second, then nutrition, then mindfulness, mental health, and good relationships. Well, I think good relationships and mindfulness and mental health come out of those three, and I would actually put good relationships as number 4 instead of number 6 in terms of leverage points. And since moving to the country, we have much more community, we're much more resourced. There are people that I can ask for help and rely on for help. Since moving to the country, I also wanted to mention a few other things that have greatly increased my quality of life. Lower EMF pollution. I'm not bombarded constantly by all of my neighbors' Wi-Fi. And the Wi-Fi affects people with migraine more than other people. We're more sensitive to it because we have a lot of metal buildup in our bodies, so we're kind of like walking antennas. And this might explain why some of us are so highly sensitive, and why some of us are very tuned in to sort of the collective and what's going on in the collective, because we're constantly downloading a lot more information because of the amount of metal we have in our system. And the Wi-Fi signals do affect our cells in the same way that like an excess of glutamate in the brain will affect them. There's an influx of calcium that kills the cell. And this has been proven that that's the mechanism through which Wi-Fi damages the body on a physical level. So we have an Ethernet cable now, and we don't have Wi-Fi, and yeah, we have our cell phones, but we don't use them nearly as much, so that's made a huge difference for me, huge. Light pollution, the full moon was out last night. That's not really a form of light pollution because it's a different frequency. It doesn't have the blue light. When I was living in the city, my neighbor's light just flooded in through my bedroom window, and even though I'd wear the mask and stuff, it was like I could, again, you become highly sensitive, so I could just feel it in my system. I could just sense that light. My biology could sense it. So not having the light pollution is really awesome. Noise pollution, out here it's mostly just the crickets at night that cause the noise pollution. Me and my husband lay out, we put a bed out on the deck, and we just go to sleep outside with the breeze and the crickets, and it's just lovely, lovely way to fall asleep. Yeah, so I wanted to read a little bit from this book, Essentialism. I want to point out a little bit more about the difference between a non-essentialist and an essentialist. See if you identify with any of these statements, and see if you could consider trying to shift your internal dialogue and internal messaging towards more of an essentialist mentality. So a non-essentialist thinks that they have to be all things to all people. I have to, it's all important, and how can I fit it all in are questions and statements that they find themselves saying, whereas an essentialist has the mantra, less but better. I choose to, only a few things really matter, and what are the trade-offs? A non-essentialist, what they do is they're focused on the undisciplined pursuit of more. Reacts to what's most pressing, says yes to people without really thinking, tries to force execution at the last moment, whereas an essentialist pursues the disciplined pursuit of less. Pauses to discern what really matters, says no to everything except for the essential, removes obstacles to make execution easy. And then the non-essentialist, this is what they get. They live a life that does not satisfy. They take on too much and their work suffers. They feel out of control. They're unsure of whether the right things got done, and they feel overwhelmed and exhausted. Being a mother is sort of a crash course in non-essentialism. Whereas the essentialist lives a life that really matters, chooses carefully in order to do great work, feels in control, gets the right things done, and experiences joy in the journey. What a concept, huh? We could all use a little bit more of that. So I just found that super insightful, and he has a whole chapter on sleep in here, and just how important that is for not just physical health, but creativity and success. Yeah. So, this relentless pace of modern life, it's just, we need more resiliency, and no one's going to hand that on a platter to us. I think, especially as a mother, I've learned that you're not going to wait around for the world to slow down and to make things a priority for you. You have to do it yourself. And, you know, it can even just come down to breathing deeply. In craniosacral therapy, we call this interoceptive awareness, which is the ability to slow down and just notice your heartbeat, the pace of your heart, your breathing, the shape of your body as a 3D experience, really any kind of sensory perceptions of your internal state. Maybe it's a pain or a discomfort, and slowing down enough to be able to tune into those things. So for me, what I do is I just lock the bathroom door and I do a brief little meditation, and I think that finding a neutral space can really reset your nervous system, because the nervous system is always geared to try to be available or react to the situation at hand. And in craniosacral therapy, the principle is that basically love is the space of neutrality, a space of non-judgment. And just being able to find a few neutral spaces, maybe it's going out into nature and really sinking in, waiting to the space until your mental chatter slows down, and finding a neutral space where your nervous system can actually reset itself. Another thing I've been interested in is EMDR, which is a rapid eye desensitization, which has been shown to be really good for healing trauma among veterans and other people with post-traumatic stress disorder. The idea here is that during REM sleep, your eyes naturally do that. They kind of have this motion side to side, and you can actually even just look up on YouTube and find videos of these balls going side to side and do some reprogramming. So basically bringing up any kind of experience or emotion that's unresolved, and feeling in your body awareness, any sensations in your body as this comes up while you're tracking this ball back and forth. I mean, some people would probably say you shouldn't do that yourself without a trained practitioner, but I wasn't able to find a trained practitioner out here, and I am the type of person who just likes to experiment and do things on my own. But what I did notice is that in doing this practice, that there would be a point where there was a deep inhalation, and in craniosacral therapy, we call that the breath of life. It often happens when there's a neutral is reached, and it's like a reset. It's kind of like if you turned off the power cable on your power cable, you know, that switch that goes on and off, you turn it off and on. It's kind of like this reset, reboot that happens with the body. So I've been reprogramming some of my limiting belief systems, and yeah, there's just so many resources. But sleep is the number one for me. So I hope you found this valuable and interesting, and I want you to stay tuned. In the coming months, I'm going to be sending out some blog posts on topics that I find really interesting. One of them is good versus bad fats, and I'm going to be going a lot into oxidized oils, which most of us know are not good for us, but some of the nuances of that, and get really granular and really technical about which oils are good and which aren't, and why. And something like ghee, which I thought was a healthy oil because it does not contain polyunsaturated fatty acids that get oxidized. Turns out it has cholesterol in it that gets oxidized, and we all know, you know, cholesterol is actually not a bad thing, and saturated fat is not a bad thing, but oxidized cholesterol is. So I'm always learning new information. In another blog post, I'm going to be sharing with you my insights into why women get more migraines than men, aside from the hormonal considerations. You can look online and find many articles that explain the reasons why women are hormonally more prone to migraine than men, but I want to talk about some of the sociological reasons that I've discovered since coaching people. So stay tuned. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a fabulous day with a very clear head, that you're able to slow down, self-regulate, and get to bed at a decent hour. Take care. Thanks for watching.